Hey guys, so we are still learning about the 1920s, and we have started talking more about immigration policies in the 1920s that America had, immigration reform legislation. This is going to be another big time, besides the Chinese Exclusion Act, where America passes legislation to kind of halt and limit the number of people immigrating to America. So that's what we've been talking about. We talked about the just kind of more nativist feelings that are coming up. We've talked about why this is happening. It's after World War I. There's some things going on around the world, specifically in Russia, that make Americans fearful of communism. And then remember we talked about Eugene Debs and, his run for office and, what's happened with him. And that's also made the American government fearful. And just all different reasons. We talked about the KKK and how their membership has risen in the 1920s because they have expanded their, we don't like you list. It's expanded, and they've included other people and groups. And so, very sad time period, but it is something that happened in America. And it's just hard for people that have immigrated to America. And so, to get back to the legislation, though, the government has tried to pass different acts, such as the Emergency Quota Act and the Immigration Act, where they limited the number of people that could immigrate to America based on how many people from that country were in America at a certain year. So we talked about, I think it was in 1921, they made the number, whatever percentage of people that were in America in 1910, then 3% of those people could immigrate to America. And then remember, they said, okay, this is too much, because they were specifically trying to target the new immigrants. And so there were more new immigrants in America in 1910 than there were previously. So they said, okay, let's limit this let's move this back to 1890. And we'll change the 3% to 2%, because that's really going to limit the number of new immigrants that can come to America. And remember, they get this name new immigrants because they come over later on, and they're like birds of passage. That's what they call them. They come over here usually alone, single, with the goal of making money and returning home. They don't really plan to come to America. They don't really want to assimilate to American culture. They, if they do have children here, they don't really want them to grow up Americanized. They don't want them to marry an American. They really just want to keep and maintain their culture. And so a lot of them don't come from countries that have democracy. A lot of them don't come from English-speaking countries, and they don't care to learn English for whatever reason. And so, there's a lot of tension. They're also fulfilling jobs that Americans could have or did have, or, there's just a lot of tensions. And so the government's goal, instead of really kind of protecting them, is to limit the number of people that can come to the country, because they think that will help fix, the issues that we're facing. So that's what we have been discussing. And then we've also been discussing society and industry in the 1920s. We also talked about politics, President Harding, and then we talked about Coolidge. We talked about, just Albert Fall and different people, the person who sold medical supplies to veterans hospitals and kept the money, essentially stealing from the government, but the American people. Albert Fall, Secretary of the Interior, taking bribes from private investors for drilling rights. Just not a good situation for America. And then we also learned about the supply side economics, where they have lowered taxes so much that it's going to eventually just kind of fall out. And we're going to see that. And we've also seen people, buying things on installment plans. We learned that you could buy a vacuum for, I think it was for a year, a payment plan for a year, and you put $8 down. So you give them $8 in the store, and they let you leave with the vacuum, and then you pay $5 per month to the store for the vacuum cleaner. And so people are going to get themselves into trouble buying things on credit and installment plans, and we're starting to see people buying things that they want and not necessarily things that they need, things that are going to make their lives easier. We talked about sliced bread. I know y'all are laughing at me, but that is something that people spent more money on for the convenience factor. They didn't need it, but they wanted it. And then you have these advertisers, on the radio that their job is to convince you that you need it. And so, of course, you're going to switch over and think that you need it, and you're going to want to spend the money on it. So that's just some of the things we've been talking about. We're going to continue learning about the 1920s and finishing it up with, of course, the Great Depression in 1929. So stay tuned for more 1920s history.